Hi, my name's Lee. Welcome to my camp kitchen. Today I'm going to be making spaghetti with anchovies. It's an old recipe from an old cookbook I have from the province of France. It's really delicious, it only requires a few ingredients and it comes together really quickly. The pasta water takes double the amount of time to cook as the pasta sauce does. So let's go, let's start cooking. So the ingredients we need is some garlic, about 4 cloves of garlic, some tomatoes, about 500 grams or 1 pound of tomatoes, some black olives, I've got Kalamata pitted olives here, of course the anchovies, I've got anchovy fillets in olive oil, some basil, look I only have dried basil but fresh basil is way better, however it's still wonderful with this basil, dried basil, some olive oil, some Parmesan cheese, some salt, a little bit of butter, that's what we're going to stir through the pasta in the end, and some pasta. This is 350 grams of pasta. P.S. the best gluten-free pasta I know of. So the first thing I want to do is grab a little pan and put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the pan, and then I can use my fingers here, it's a bit easier to grab them, about 6 anchovy fillets. Anchovies are wonderful, they add a complex flavour to dishes. What I want to do now is put this on the lowest heat possible and just let the anchovies melt into the olive oil. I don't want to fry them at all. So I put my pan over the lowest heat possible and all I want to do is warm the oil up, and then eventually the anchovy fillets will almost melt into the oil. At the same time I put a large pan of water on the stove for the pasta. I salt it like the ocean. I put the lid back on and I'll wait for that to come to the boil. Now I prepare the garlic and the tomatoes. So with the garlic, all I want to do is take the skin off and we're going to crush them slightly, and the garlic goes in whole. Then we discard it later on. Sometimes I forget to take them out and my husband gets a nice little surprise. So we want about 4 cloves of garlic. I'll just smash them down a little bit to break open the lovely flavours. Now with the tomatoes, the recipe says to peel the tomatoes and de-seed them. I don't worry about peeling them, but I do de-seed them. This is not a pureed tomato dish. We're going to cook the tomatoes fast and we actually want the liquid to evaporate. So what I find the easiest way to remove the seeds is just to cut the tomatoes in half, and then I just try and get as many seeds out as possible by putting my spoon in like so and removing the seeds. If you're at home, you can blanch the tomatoes and take the skin off as well, but honestly I don't mind a little bit of tomato skin in my pasta. So that's what we want to get out, the tomato seeds. With the tomatoes now, we just want to chop them into a bit of a dice. So cut them into sort of like that sort of size piece. The anchovies, while I've been chopping the tomatoes, have almost melted into the oil, and that's what we're after. So with the olives, you can use sliced black olives or just use whole olives. The recipe calls for about 3/4 of a cup or 2/3 of a cup of olives. So what I like to do is just sort of split them in half a little bit. But the olives are delicious, they provide a saltiness to the dish. So we have our tomatoes, our garlic and our olives, and that's our prep done. So the anchovies have completely melted into the oil, which is what we wanted, and it's all ready to go. We just have to wait for the pasta water to come to the boil. The pasta water has come to the boil, so I've already salted it, but I'm going to put just a little bit of olive oil in, and that just helps the strands separate a little bit as I cook them. Now this pasta takes about 10 minutes, so I'm just going to put the lid on so it comes to the boil quicker, then I'll give it a stir and take the lid off. The water's come back to the boil, so I'll just give it a little stir, and now time to put our sauce together. So before I light the stove, I get a pan. Now you want a wide pan because we want to cook the tomatoes really quickly. We don't want them to be in a mush. We want them to actually resemble tomatoes still. So add about 3 tablespoons of olive oil and put in your 4 cloves of garlic and then turn your heat to high. So a nice high heat. As soon as the garlic starts to sizzle, then we add the tomatoes. So the garlic has started to sizzle. I don't want it to brown. All it's doing is flavouring the oil. So it's time to add the tomatoes. Add all of your tomatoes, and we're only going to cook them for about 5 minutes. Over a very high heat. Now at this stage you can add a little bit of salt, but just a little bit, because the anchovies are salty, the olives are salty, so just a tiny little bit of salt. And what we want to do here is warm up those tomatoes in that lovely hot olive oil. And stir them or shake the pan or flip the tomatoes over from time to time. And what we're aiming to do is to reduce the liquid. So we don't want it to go into a mulch, we just want it to fry. So watch they don't burn as you cook them. So the pasta's nearly ready. The tomatoes have been cooking for about 5 minutes. They're exactly how I want them. Next goes in the olives. And toss that around. Next we put in our beautiful melted anchovies. And give that a little stir or a toss. Some black pepper. And lastly some basil now. If you have fresh basil, now's the time to add it. Just tear off some pieces of fresh basil, or just use about a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of dried basil. And that's our sauce done. But we still have delicious things to put in it. The pasta is ready. Turn off the pot and load the pasta into the sauce. Turn off my heat. And gently toss that around. Smells amazing. Now the toppings. I'm using a white bowl because I don't use any filters on my videos, and sometimes I think, well, I definitely know that the food doesn't look as good as it does in real life, so maybe a white bowl will help show you how beautiful this actually is. So I pile some pasta into the bowl. You can discard the garlic cloves if you wish. They've done their job. And what I do now is a little bit naughty, but it's so good, is just put a little tiny bit of butter on the pasta, some Parmesan cheese, as much or as little as you want, and time to taste it. The best part. So delicious, and I know I say it for every video but I'm not lying, it's delicious. I would not show you something that wasn't delicious. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.